Short game wise, yes, I can. Long game wise, no. No, I have not.
He's talking the long game.
They played the long game.
They gotta play the long game.
They're experienced and they played the long game.
No, you're talking the long game.
They're experienced and they played the long game.
Very nice.
Long game is back.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to another episode of the Long Game Pod. Casey is in an undisclosed location, in a bunker somewhere in a hotel. This is the commitment to the pod. Is Casey is traveling with his family and he packed this shirt. Did the microphone get in the travel bag? Did you check it?
I'd show you the travel case, but it's propping up my laptop right now. But yeah, I get the whole. We got through customs, or not customs, to go to Florida, but we got through wherever the. Last year, we came down to Florida. I not a big deal, not to brag, but had some protein powder in my bag, and they called the bomb sniffing dogs, and I almost missed. Like I had told my wife, like, just go, take our daughter, go, leave me behind. This time, less bomb sniffing dogs for the microphone, but we got here.
Awesome. And did you play a little? You got one round of golf in?
I got one round of golf in yesterday. I'm going to try to play again in a few days. I had a lesson scheduled for a few days ago, but had to call it off because I threw up my back loading luggage into the rental car, which is the oldest I've ever felt in my life.
Which type of back?
A piece of luggage into a minivan, which was about rock bottom in my life.
Was it one of those like throw out your back and like instantly everything seizes up and you just like are in the most pain ever?
Yeah, I'd been building for a little bit. I probably get something similar to this once a year. And it was building, and then the night before Christmas, wrapping presents, I really felt the go, hunched over, and then Christmas Day was really bad. I was crawling around my dad's house, and then got a little better, and then just really re-aggravated it on Friday. So this guy I was supposed to take a lesson from, we came down last year too, was supposed to take a lesson from, got COVID. So now this guy thinks I'm just like stringing him along for lessons that are never going to happen. But I'm going to try to circle back to that.
You were supposed to get a lesson from him last year, and he had COVID?
No, I got COVID.
Oh,
we came down here and got COVID. And so I'm 0 for 2 trying to get lessons from this guy. But and it was evident I hadn't had any lessons when I played yesterday because it was not pretty.
I saw the card, though. A nice little birdie on 16, par 3, to keep you coming back for more.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was bad.
Did you post it?
It was a couple four putts.
Did you post
it? Yeah, I post every score.
If you play, you post.
You have to.
That's what the USGA wants. If you play, you post. Also, I did see a big update from the USGA, which is you can now post 9-hole scores on its own. Which
I saw that.
It would seem silly, but that's actually huge because normally you post a 9-hole score, you got to wait for it to be combined. Nonsense. It's a great idea.
It's funny that they had for like years this campaign of like just play 9, just play 9, just play 9.
But it doesn't count.
It doesn't count. Get the kids involved. Just play 9. It doesn't count. It's like, well, how about we make it count? So luckily, they fixed that in their software.
All right, so it's the first week of the PGA Tour season, but a weird week for us because we got travel, we got kids. We didn't get an episode in time to do picks for the century, but I'm excited to watch a little golf. But we got a little surprise bonus episode, and we just spent an hour talking to Kyle Porter. Kyle's a golf writer for CBS. He writes this book called A Normal Sport, which Casey has printed out and read on the plane and to prep for the pod. What was your reaction to the conversation with Kyle?
Great guy. Really interesting story. Found his way to covering golf. Pretty unconventional way, I'd say. But yeah, it was a great conversation. He's great insight on covering the tour. Very different way than a lot of, I would say, the traditional old guard golf media covers it. And if you don't know Kyle, if you don't think you know who Kyle is and you follow golf, you know who Kyle is because you've definitely seen his Twitter profile pop up on your feed. So yeah, great conversation.
It was awesome. It like re-energizes me for the Long Game Pod because we just were thinking about like what types of content we want to create, the stuff that we want to talk about. I messaged Casey a couple weeks ago. I'm like, hey, you know that guy Kyle Porter? He's like, yeah, he's like one of my favorite golf writers. I'm like, he follows me on Twitter. And I was like, so I just DM'd him or he happened to DM me one day and was like, hey, can I send you a copy of my book? And I was like, what is happening right now? And so I went back in an email. I replied to his email. I was like, just going to shoot my shot here. My friend and I have this podcast. Will you come on it? And he was like, yes. And I was like, wait, for real? And it was awesome. It was awesome.
Well, he must have checked the stats and saw that we were up to the number 49 golf podcast in the United States.
Yeah, he told his wife, he's like, honey, I need it. Like, you got to take the kids today because I gotta be in the long game pod. They're huge in Sweden, and this is a big audience for me to sell copies of the book.
No, good conversation though. I really enjoyed it. And he wants to come back quarterly to do kind of a state of the sport kind of thing. So that'd be really fun.
Yeah, so enjoy this conversation with Kyle. We talk about his path as a golf writer, how he watches golf, how he follows golf, a little bit about a little insight into somebody that's in the golf world that I think will be a really enjoyable conversation. We talked a little bit about um, the upcoming golf season, but I think it'd be awesome to have him on in a couple months. And hey, let us know if you like this episode. Send us a note, longgamepod@gmail.com. Let us know, should we have more guests? You just want to hear Casey and I keep riffing and ranting? I had an awesome time talking to Kyle. I'd love to get more guests on. So feel free to, holler at us, send us some feedback. And Casey sent me a message. We got a listener live on the ground at the DL3 grill, which made my week. Fantastic. So
Absolutely.
long game pod
Shout out
run.
Mark who went to the DL3 grill
All right.
over the holidays, sent us another great review.
Case, get some dead bugs in, get some bird dogs in, get that mobility in the back, and we need to get you ready. All right.
You got it. Well, let's see if I make it to this lesson in a few days, but
All right.
hopefully I'll have more to share, or I'll be doing this vertically or horizontally. Sorry, from my bed.
All right. Here's our interview with Kyle Porter.
He's talking the long game.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Long Game Podcast. I'm Dave Gerhardt. This is my co-host, Casey Ford. Casey, where are you right now? Are you on location somewhere, undisclosed bunker in a hotel somewhere?
Yeah, this is called the Situation Room. It was a situation trying to find a conference room in this hotel. It came down to the last minute, but we got one. So it looks like a hostage video where there's nothing that can give away my location in the background.
Where are your children right now?
I think they're in the room screaming, which is I'm on vacation from my vacation.
I love that. And we're pumped because it's finally 2024. We started this golf podcast in the fall, which is like the worst time because there's plenty of news, but we're not trying to be a news show. And so we're like here talking about like the Grant Thornton and, whatever, the PNC, and we're excited. There's actual golf. But today we have an actual golf person, a golf talent, an industry media mind. Kyle Porter is here with us. Kyle's one of my favorite golf resources. When I texted Casey, I was like, this guy Kyle Porter follows me on Twitter. I'm not sure why. And then he sent me a copy of his book, and I'm like, you know what? I usually don't ever do this, but I'm going to shoot my shot. And I asked him to come on the podcast, and he was kind enough to come on. So Kyle's a golf writer. He writes for CBS Sports. He just published the latest edition of his book called Normal Sport 3. You've probably seen him on golf Twitter if you're in that world. Kyle Porter, welcome to the Long Game Podcast. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm sorry, I'm not in the Situation Room. I'm in my my back office, but I am very sweaty and red faced because I just got done with a run trying to fight dad bod. I'm right there with you, Dave.
Case.
And yeah, that's kind of my situation right now. It's not pretty.
Casey and I were just texting about running last night because he's like, we couldn't be more opposite. I'm like, yeah, you go for a run without a headphones. He's like, no, you run and I don't.
Yeah, headphones are just a completely
but
separate
don't
thing.
you?
Yeah, are you sure that's not a fake background? Kyle, it looks like something that maybe you uploaded to make it look like you're somewhere else.
No, it's not.
It looks too clean.
I spent too much money creating this background. I wish it was a fake background. But wait, which of y'all doesn't wear headphones?
I don't.
Dave runs without headphones.
It's a new thing. I'm happy to talk about this with you.
Well, what's the like? Well, yeah, I would love to hear more. Like, what's the reason?
So
great. I don't feel as crazy anymore.
All right, I'm not even like a hard, like what did you just run today? How much did you run?
3 miles.
Perfect. I ran 3 miles this morning. I started to run a lot more. I was going to train for like a marathon. It got too much in the 8, 9, 10. I didn't feel good. I get this nice buzz from a run, and I realized like 3 to 6 miles is perfect.
Yeah.
It sets me up for the day. It changes my mood, makes me feel great. And I would be listening to podcasts. I would, listen to podcasts or music. But then somebody that a good friend of mine was like, just try running with no headphones. I'm like, well, what do you do? And once you get into the run, it's amazing. It gives me, if I do it in the morning before my day, it gives me time to just like, it's almost like a form of meditation. So I'm not gonna try to sell you on it. I
So
can
are you thinking about different ideas for like
business.
business, or
Yeah, like
thinking about?
I might be I might be like grumpy about something like with my family or my business or I don't necessarily go out for a run with an intention of like I'm gonna solve this problem, but I found that like if I go without listening to a podcast or music even, it forces me. It's almost, I don't know if you've ever tried meditation at all, but it almost forces me to just kind of like just be there, and I'm just running, and it sucks for the first 5 to 10 minutes, and a couple times I do it, but now I found myself looking forward to it, and I just get out there and I don't know, I'm rethinking about my run. Probably took me 30 minutes to run those 3 miles this morning, just nice and slow and easy, and I don't know what I thought about it. I don't know what happened, but I came back and it was almost like I blacked out and it didn't happen. So I think you should
Okay,
try
so
it.
maybe it speeds it up a little bit, even
It speeds
like
it
in your
up.
head.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. There's something about like, I'd be listening to like, No Laying Up or Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan or something like that. I just need some space, guys. I don't
Yeah.
need those guys jamming in my ears the whole time. And I found
So
it's become a nice little break in the day for me.
the thing that speeds it up for me is I've got a couple guys that we usually run together. They're out of town today, so I did it on my own, and we usually run at a slow enough pace that we can kind of chat
Yeah.
throughout. And that for me is like, oh, we just ran 6 miles. Like that went by incredibly fast. I have
Have you always been a runner?
no, I grew up playing baseball, so we did more like shorter stuff. But like dad bod, I've got 4 kids, so I've got to do something
Yeah.
to and honestly, like the thing for me over the last, really it started probably, I kind of got into it a little bit before COVID, and then into COVID I was running with a group of guys, and we would run on the streets of where I live, and it was apocalyptic. It was like there's like did the like this is it's we haven't seen a human in 6 days.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right.
And so it really, I loved the sort of communal part of it, but I also loved something that you said, which is it just changes my outlook, my mood on the day. It gives me I think there's something to like suffering a little bit first thing in the morning,
Yeah.
and then everything else seems just a little bit, I don't know about easier, but just more manageable throughout the day.
That's how I am. I live a very soft life.
Same.
And so that's the only that it makes me feel like I'm a valuable member of society. Like I could do so, like if the zombies came, like I'd be okay.
Yeah.
I could outrun them. And then Casey's gonna just like jump out of the building.
I was
right
just gonna
now,
say this running conversation might as well be in Spanish to me.
but- You don't know Spanish.
You're more of a Pilates guy or what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a headphones on the couch kind of guy.
But the reason I got the running thing for me, Kyle, was like I used to like go to CrossFit and go to the gym, and it just became too. You have 4 kids, which is like you deserve it. You deserve a trophy or something. I have 2. Casey has 2, and just the day shrinks so quickly. And the thing that I loved about running was like it's kind of like you can take it anywhere. You're traveling for work, you're visiting family, wherever you are. Like if you can just sneak out for 30-40 minutes, you know that like your mood is going to be changed for the rest of the day. And that's kind of the thing that flipped it for me. Did you see there's this clip? There was this clip, Casey and I shared it last week, but I forget who posted it. But it was like Tiger was like, I used to wake up, I used to run 4 miles. I'd come home, I'd have breakfast, I'd lift, I'd go hit balls, I'd play 18, I'd go play another 18, then I'd go play basketball, then I'd go play tennis, whatever. And then John Daly, then they showed John Daly and he's like, he did his thing. But like, do you actually believe that? Is it as a guy who ran 3 miles this morning? Like, do you believe Tiger was playing 18 holes, running 8 miles in a day, lifting? I guess that's why he got hurt. Like, is any of that hyperbole?
No, I think that was part of his. Tiger is wired very differently. He's when people talk about geniuses all the time, right? And how they're wired like so differently. And I was listening to somebody, it might have been Morgan Housel, who wrote Psychology of Money, and he was talking about how like, oh, you think like you're surprised that Elon Musk, who took on NASA when he was like 28, is popping off on Twitter. Like, why are you surprised? Like, he's different than like all these other humans. And I think Tiger's a genius. Like, I legitimately think that. And I think that he is just wired so differently. And some of that is nature, some of it was nurture. And there's probably some hyperbole in there. Like, did he run 5 miles every single day? Probably not. But I do think that I think he aspired to be this, like, almost like the Brooks Koepka thing, where Brooks is like, oh, I'm an NFL linebacker. It's like, yeah, I've seen NFL linebackers. You're probably not.
Right.
I think Tiger kind of was like the pre-Brooks, like he aspired to that. And that was his way of sort of trying to make that happen early on as a golfer.
It's funny because the average male can't even go play golf, and then you're so tired you have to sit on the couch for the rest of the day.
Well, that's the thing is, like, I've never played enough golf to where my body gets accustomed to like the swing to where I'm not sore the next day. Like, I've never played, like, we had a guys trip a couple weeks ago and we played, what did we play? Like almost 72 holes in 3 days. And that's like the most I've ever played in 3 days. I've not played, these guys are playing 36 a day every day. Yeah. And I think your body just gets, you know how when you haven't lifted in a while and you go lift and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm so sore that I can't even like go to the bathroom the next day.
You're sore for like 4 days after.
Yeah, like that's how I am sometimes with golf. And I think once you get into the routine of lifting, though, it goes away. And I think that's how those guys are with the golf swing.
It's so underrated, playing golf multiple days in a row. I have just started recently, like, playing more, and I'm in Vermont. It's not like the California amateur golf scene, right? I play some competitive amateur golf. Like, I'm a, one handicap, right? There's tournaments that are like 2 or 3 days in a row. By that third day, I'm like, the last thing that I want to do on planet Earth is go play golf right now. And like, the fact that these guys have to do this, whatever day you have the pro-am, you have there's a practice round, there's a pro-am, there's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, get on a plane. Like, I think that's this so underrated of people who see golf from the outside world. And they're like, man, this is the softest thing ever. And I think if you actually had to get out there and walk that many days in a row, that mental grind of all those days in a row, it's insane what that must feel like.
I think about this a lot. And I think it is this idea of falling in love with the boredom of it. Because when you've done it that much for that long, I mean, think about how many golf shots has Phil Mickelson hit in his life? Like 30 million? I don't know. I'm just making up numbers. You could probably do the math on it.
He probably knows.
Millions. Yeah, he probably does. He's hit millions and millions of golf shots, and you have to be in. There's this great quote from Novak Djokovic from a couple years ago. It was an interview, and I think it was the Financial Times. I believe it's a newspaper in London. And he said, I just love hitting the tennis ball. And it's kind of a throwaway quote unless you dig into it and you're like, yeah, that's kind of what it takes to be great at something. Like whatever it is, whether it's golf or tennis or making spreadsheets or doing healthcare deals or whatever it is, you have to, if you want to be great at it, you have to really love that thing. And I mean, to your point, Dave, like there's a lot of guys out on tour that they don't love it. I was talking to Charles Howell one time, and he is somebody that loves it, but he was like, guys don't understand how stressful and not fun tournament golf is. And there's guys out on tour that are just like guys that we know that have regular jobs. They're just doing it because they get paid good money, and it'd be like, what else are they going to do? And but I think the ones that are truly great, like the Spieths and the Rorys and the Rahms, like they truly love hitting the golf ball. And I think that's a pretty, it's a thing that I love studying and thinking about. And it's something that a lot of them enjoy talking about as well.
I was going to say, there's a clip going around social media right now from a podcast with Doc Rivers, and he's talking about playing with a bunch of people. And Tiger had been practicing at the course, and they went out, played a whole round, come back. Tiger's still out there. They go have lunch or whatever they had after. It starts pouring rain. They go, look, he's still out there practicing. It was like 2 weeks before the British or something. So he just wanted to simulate rain. So like, to your point, you got to be you got to be like a psycho to really want to hit balls in the rain, but it's really the love of that and the mundane stuff that makes the difference, I think, from these guys.
Well, I think one thing that's interesting, are you doing it out of fear or out of joy? John Rahm had this quote last year during Riviera Genesis Week, and he was talking about how he's like, I don't practice and try to get better and try to win events because I'm scared of not doing it. I do it because I love doing it. And I think for Tiger, I think there is, I was talking to Rory about this one time, and he was talking about how Tiger loves figuring out like the really nerdy, like scientific, like what if I shift my, right index finger 2 millimeters this way, what does that do to the ball flight? And I think there's a true, like, wired into his DNA joy of doing that. And I think that's not, that specific thing is true of all top guys, because they're not all crazy like that, but there is a true joy that emanates from most of them from just like hitting the golf ball hundreds of thousands, if not millions of times.
Kyle, you think there's anybody that's a top-ish player in the world, let's say top 100, that is that this is my job business mindset, that doesn't love it, but they might be good enough at it and they're making a bunch of money? Or is there a cutoff, like it's not possible to be elite to that level?
Or did they all just go to live?
Right. I scribbled in my notebook as I'm telling you, like that. It's kind of like the perfect case for the other tour, then, right? Like,
for sure. It definitely is. I think there's different levels to it, right? Like I can think of one name that I'll tell you later that has been in the top 100 that basically hates golf and doesn't, like, if he could make $400,000 or $700,000 a different way, he would go do that. But I think there's some guys, certainly even in the top 25 or 50, that, like look at Brooks Koepka. Does Brooks Koepka love golf the way that Rory or Spieth does? Probably not. But I definitely think he loves it more than the guy that has been in the top 100 that hates it. So I think there's guys in the top 100 that don't like it as much as some of the guys in the top 10. I think where the cutoff is it's very, very difficult to get inside the top 10 in the world if you don't love it. Like Victor Hovland loves golf. Like he goes and plays these crazy courses in Scandinavia in like his off months because he loves golf. Like the guys that are, it's when you're that talented and you love it that much, it's very difficult, even if you have all the talent in the world, to break into that top 10, which is where all those guys are, if you don't also love it.
Right. That's why you see Hovland, with his buddies in jeans playing on the TrackMan on a Friday night, having a beer, doing whatever, because it's like, well, that's what he does. That's what else am I going to do? I'm going to play golf.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say too, like it makes the Rahm decision so much more confounding to me too, because he seems like such a historian and guy that really loves the game, talks about it so much. So obviously money talks, but that's, a very confusing move from my perspective.
So I agree with you. And I think that was, you could draw this pretty distinct line before pre-Rahm of like, okay, the villains and the not villains. And maybe even more so like the guys who truly love it and the guys who kind of just wanted to take a payday. And Rahm is a very different thing. And I think a couple of things happened. One, obviously June 6th and the sort of merger changed the calculus for some of those guys. And I think that, what you're saying, if you get paid enough, you can kind of justify like, well, we're probably going to come back together anyway, so whatever. But I think the other thing that didn't get talked about as much is that Rahm is, I think, generationally good. I think it's him and Rory over the last 10 years. You could throw DJ in there. I don't know how, maybe Spieth or JT, we'll see how those guys kind of play out. But Rahm is his trajectory is to be one of the, I think, 25 best players of all time, probably better. And I don't think he ever felt like he was treated like that on the PGA Tour and in sort of the circles that he ran in. It was always Rory, Rory, Rory. And Rory deserves a lot of that, but he got almost too much of it. And I think Rahm looked at that and was like, screw this. Like, I don't want to be a part of this JT, Rory, Spieth, Tiger thing. And I don't think that's anything that, I don't think those guys ostracized him. I don't think they were, I think it was more so, remember when Tebow was a thing and people just hated Tebow because he got so much attention? And you're like, well, that's not really Tebow's fault. Like, he's just kind of doing his thing. That's how I think Rahm started to feel like that about Rory and JT and some of these other guys. And I don't know. I don't think that's the reason he left to go to LIV, but I definitely think it sort of played into the decision that he made, and it really, maybe it was the thing that eventually pushed him over the edge.
And do you see that? Do you find that, or do you think that Rory felt that as well?
Yes.
Kind of, and you think that's why he's taken the step back from kind of being so
he
outspoken in
definitely-
Players Council?
He definitely felt it. There was a moment at the Ryder Cup. I was in the press conference afterwards, and Rory got like 10 questions before Rahm got his first question.
Yeah.
And there's this moment where Rahm gets a question, and Rory jumps in and said, I mean, he's only the best player in the world. And he was trying to, I think he was trying to let Rahm know, hey, I see you. I hear your frustration. I am aware of like your annoyance with all this, and I want you to know that about me before we go forward. So I definitely think he was aware of kind of just that sort of undercurrent that's been going on for a while.
Kyle, has all of this stuff, like how long have you been covering golf now? A decade?
Yeah. So my first year covering the PGA Tour for CBS was in 2012. So this is what, 11 years now.
And before that, you were into golf. You played golf, enjoyed the game, but you weren't like focused on the whole thing, right?
Yeah, I grew up playing baseball. Played baseball in high school and college, and during that time, actually, I haven't shared this story a ton, but my mom was an elite amateur player. Like, she played in some U.S. amateurs back in the whenever that was, 70s and 80s, I guess, when she was kind of growing up, coming up. And she was a really good amateur player. So our family was always had this sort of tie to golf. We didn't play all the time. She didn't really play once she became a mom and was dealing with all the family stuff. But our family always had this sort of tie to golf. But I grew up playing baseball. That was kind of my thing that I did. Played in college.
Where did you go to college?
I started at Trinity University in San Antonio, which is a small Division III. And then I ended up at Oklahoma State and walked on. Hold on. Can we pause for a second? I've got a yard guy here. I need to tell him to go away.
You're good. You're good. So you ended up walking on at Oklahoma State?
Walking on as a baseball player at
what
Oklahoma
position?
State. I pitched at Oklahoma State. I wasn't good. I was probably the worst player on the team. Got cut and just ended up going to school there. And
I'm asking because I walked on to play baseball, to pitch at a small D1 school called Wagner College in Staten Island, New York. Small little D1 school.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. I had an amazing time. I met an amazing group of people. It was fun. I'm of the belief that like you could have pretty much gone to college anywhere and you would have found a group of people and had fun, and it's college. But one of my biggest regrets was I didn't play at all. I sat on the bench, and I still had to work out. I still had to run. I still had to do all the nonsense. Like, if I could give a lesson to my kids, it would be like, doesn't matter what school go to the place where you can play. And I should have gone to like a small, D3 school or whatever in my area where I could have been like a everyday player, and I would have gotten so much more of that. But
well, I totally agree. And that was what was interesting is my freshman year at Trinity University, I played some. I didn't play a ton, but I played some. And then I went to Oklahoma State, and I was just, very fringy to the team. And I had so much more fun with the smaller, lesser known, and I think that's a life lesson, right? Is like, these things that you aspire to that are bigger and better, or so-called bigger and better, you might not be as content with them. You might not be as satisfied with them. And, for me, when I got to Oklahoma State, it was like everybody there thought they were a first round pick. And you're like, I don't think the math works on this, guys. Like, I don't think that's going to work out.
Right.
So anyway, I got cut after one semester and ended up just going to school there, which was a ton of fun. And like you said, found kind of my group of friends, met my wife there and all that. So yeah,
Beautiful.
after college, I ended up starting an Oklahoma State website. So it's sort of like it was a website covering football and basketball. I got a corporate job. I was kind of bored, didn't love I just didn't want to be 45 or 50 and be at that same job. And so my wife was like, just start something. We're young. I was like 26 at the time. Started the Oklahoma State site, naively thinking like, okay, this could be my portfolio. This could be my resume to lead to a national writing job. I didn't care if it was in golf or football or tennis or whatever. And it turned out that it did lead to that, which doesn't really happen. I just kind of providentially met some of the right people, and Shane Bacon, who worked at Fox and then Golf Channel for a while, he was leaving the CBS position. I took his job in 2012, and that's where I've been ever since.
Side note: how many people can say that their mom was a baller amateur player? That's amazing. It's just very rare. It's very rare to hear that.
It was crazy, and I didn't appreciate it as a kid, and I don't even know that I appreciated it as an adult until now, where I'm like, oh, that was a special thing. Like, she was playing against Nancy Lopez and kind of people from that generation, and you know, it's certainly cool, and I didn't get to experience it a ton because she didn't play a lot after I was old enough to play, but it definitely was a seed of like love for golf that was kind of planted in our family that didn't grow in all the kids or in everybody, but I'm grateful for that in her life because I think it translated some in mine.
Well, one of the things like that led Casey and I to even starting this podcast is we both kind of grew up around golf through our families or playing in high school and just or playing in high school, watching on TV, working at a golf course, all those things. Then that period of like 18 to let's say 30 took it off almost, right? Because you got to do other stuff. Golf takes a lot of time. You don't have the time for that. And now it's kind of come full circle where it's like it's become that thing that I love. I've shed all my, I don't watch any other sports anymore. I've shed all my other hobbies. I got my business, I got my family, I got some fitness, and I got golf. And
Yeah.
it's become this amazing outlet. And that's kind of what led us to this podcast. And it's interesting to hear, like, you kind of have some threads of that too, which is like, it was in your DNA, but you weren't ready for it at that point in your life. And you end up covering golf. How did you go from like, hey, you weren't covering golf. Now all of a sudden your job is to cover golf as two guys with a podcast in this space. Not that we're not necessarily gonna tackle like the coverage angle, but like, how did you what did you take from your other job that got you to figure out like how to unwind this? There's so much happening. Like, what should you focus on? What's interesting? How do you have takes? Like, how did you learn what's relevant to talk about and cover in golf? I'm interested in hearing that process.
Yeah, that's a good question. I ran my Oklahoma State website for 2 years before I got, and that was my side job. I was working at a insurance company as my real job. So I don't know that I took away anything from the insurance job, but from my side job, my Oklahoma
paycheck.
State website,
A paycheck.
exactly. So
Motivation.
we talk about subsidizing things. I was subsidizing some other things, but
Sure.
my Oklahoma State site, I ended up running that it turned into a business, and I sold it in 2020. So I ran that for 8 or 9 years. But those 2 years of running it, the biggest thing that that I learned from that, and I think the thing that probably convinced or helped convince CBS to hire me, was just my consistency of like, everybody has their dream of like, oh, I want to be a writer, I want to be a blogger. And it's like, yeah, you can write one good blog post, but can you do it every day for 2 years? And even after those 2 years, I wasn't good at it. Like, I think I thought I was, but looking back, you're like, oh man, there's some tough takes, tough just ways that I wrote in there. But I was building up to something that was hopefully better than that, And so I think just being consistent and looking for and this is something that I really struggle with even now, looking for alternative takes that are logical. Like sports writing and sports commentary is so illogical most of the time. Like people just repeat what they heard on ESPN, or they heard somebody say on the local radio, and you're like, well, can we play that out? Can you take me like 3 steps past that?
Yeah,
And once
it doesn't take much. A text thread or play golf with your buddies, and you hear some like regurgitated like Stephen A. Smith take, and you're like,
Yes.
where have I heard this before?
Yes. And then you start thinking like, well, man, it doesn't seem that hard to just provide sort of a logical take that you can stand on, that has some real merit, and kind of poke back against that. So you seem very anti-establishment, and I guess in some ways it kind of was. I was always an outsider. I never went to journalism school. I never learned the AP style of writing. I never learned any of that. And so I think there were times where that hurt me. I got a little bit out over my skis in terms of being arrogant about like, oh, I'm the next Bill Simmons or whatever. But I think ultimately it helped me in that I created my own conversational style. I created my own sort of takes that went against sort of the mainstream. Now I struggle with like still doing that because there's so much groupthink on golf Twitter, as you guys have seen. Like I struggle to not have the same take as Solly, as Tron, as
Sure.
KVV, as Andy, as Brendan, as all these guys. And I feel like I am struggling to be like, okay, I want to still have my own unique stuff, but also still be part of this group. And that's been a tough balancing act over the last few years, I think.
How often are you writing now? Are you still writing every day?
Yeah, every day. For CBS, I'm writing. Oh, it could be. I mean, a major week, it's crazy, but a regular week is probably 3 to 5 articles a week. And then I've obviously got my normal sport newsletter, and I'll write that once or twice a week. So yeah, I try to write every single day, even if I don't publish it. I think just the act of writing is. I mean, it compounds over time, but also I love it. Like Novak Djokovic, I love hitting the tennis ball. I love writing.
This is what I want to talk about with you. So tell me, take us into your writing process. Is there a certain time of day that it happens? You have 4 kids. You have a job. Like this is your job, but there's you just had a guy banging on the door about a landscape. Like life happens. So I would love to hear the writing process.
Well, one quick story about that, and then I'll tell you about the process. But I think when people aspire to this is any job, but I think sometimes when people aspire to like be a writer, be a blogger or whatever, it's like, again, it's easy if you don't have distractions, if you don't have kids, if everything, like you've got your little candles and your music and you're good to go. I've written blog posts at a Best Buy in Stillwater because I didn't have my computer with me, and just emailed them to myself. And like, there's just so
Wait, did you go to like a demo laptop and like type it up?
Yes. Yeah. Because I had to get
You're just over there like
yeah, I had to get it out.
Okay, I got locked out of this. You know the administrative password?
Yeah, is there anybody on the Geek Squad that can help me?
Exactly. My computer was at my buddy's house. He wasn't home, and I had to get a post up, and that was the logical conclusion. So
that's amazing.
It's all about like, okay, just doing it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But
you ever read any Stephen Pressfield stuff?
Oh yeah, Art of War and
yeah. So I love what you said, like reminded me of him. It's almost like you didn't say this, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like if you're a writer, you're going to write. Whether if all you got is a piece of paper, if you got your phone, if you it's like the amateur is the one who's going to be like, well, I was distracted and I needed everybody out of the house and I needed the right mood and I didn't have my coffee. Like there's something there that you said that I think that speaks to, hey, this is my craft. I'm going to do this regardless of what I have. Right.
Yeah, and and that was where I learned to be a pro when it was my side job, when I was doing the Oklahoma State side, and some of that was just having the parameters of like, I only had an hour in the morning, or I only had 30 minutes at lunch. I have to like do this, and so I think that forced me into learning how to be a professional. But in terms of like my preference, I love writing. It's hard, like, as you know, with the kids and the working out and all that. My preference is like I'd say 5:30 a.m. to like 8 a.m. just write for 2.5 hours. Just write as much as I possibly can, whether it's for the newsletter, for CBS, for the book, which I was doing a lot of in the fall. Because I think that once I get to the afternoon, I just struggle to think as clearly. I like to read in the afternoon and just kind of chill a little bit in the afternoon. Obviously, if there's breaking news, I got to write about that, but
Sure.
I find my clarity in the morning to be so much higher. And I also try to leave myself a trail from the previous day going into the next day so that I have somewhere to pick up. I have somewhere to
So
something
if
to
you're
pick up
if
on.
you're writing at 5:30, are you like are you waking up at 5:25 and going right downstairs and like opening the computer and starting to write, or is there like a process?
It's usually like I would say like 5:15, get some coffee, come out to my office, turn the lights down low, and just start writing.
Yeah.
And I've got usually I have like a document of like, hey, this would be interesting to explore. Maybe I should think about, like, I'm sure you guys saw the Podrick Harrington quote about getting his kids into golf. Like, I've got a note right now, hey, I need to write something about this. So I've just got different things, like different rabbit trails to go down, and just getting and with the book it's a little bit easier because it's kind of laid out. Like, I pull stuff that happened throughout the year, and sometimes in the afternoon I'll pull, let's say, 20 different things for the next morning and just say, hey, write about 300 words on this, 500 words on this, whatever.
Nice.
And it's easy to pick up in the morning and just go right into that. Now, I just described an ideal day. Normally it's okay, the kids were yelling at like 6:20. I had to get 3 miles in. So it usually starts more like 8 a.m. instead of 5:30. But my ideal day is I really love writing as early in the morning as possible.
No, do you get a second wind at night?
No, I just read at night.
Yeah.
Either hang out with my wife and talk, and we'll read on the couch together or whatever. But I try not to write at night.
I like the system of I'm interested in this as like a marketer, business, whatever. But I like, you need to be able to sleep and let your mind rest. And so I think you have a cool process, which is like, it's like a swipe file, right? Like every great writer, copywriters had this swipe file. You kind of have these ideas and you're stashing them away. And so you know that in the morning, because it'd also be very easy to like get up at 5:30 and you're like, I only have an hour and a half right now. I'm on Twitter, I'm reading articles, like my mind is going. But like you kind of have this ready, you have this swipe file aside, and you're like, okay, this is my writing time. Let me go pull up, like, okay, which things should I write about? Okay, I'm going to pick that and I can focus my brain on that, as opposed to, it's very hard to be context switching and try to like get 500 good, or whatever, how many words out, right?
Well, that's the thing. I almost feel like there should be this reverse work day where, as somebody who works from home, I told my wife this. I don't think I could pull this off just because of the nature of breaking news, but I would love to work from like 5 to 9 a.m., take 9 to 5 p.m. off, and just like hang out, do stuff with our kids are homeschooled. So do stuff with them, go on a date with my wife, date, whatever, and then work from like 5 to 8 p.m. and then have the night. I don't I don't think I could do that just because, you have calls, you have email, you have all these different things that are sort of built into the culture of our American workday. But that would be my preference, just because I find myself, Dave, running over to Twitter. And the reason we do these things, I think, like I'll run over to Twitter or I'll do the Immaculate Grid for baseball or whatever, is because they're easier or more fun than the task at hand. And we know that there's always something that's stimulating there. And if you're outside of the workday, if it's 5:30 a.m., I know in my head, hey, nobody's up right now, nobody's tweeting, nothing's going on. I can just focus on this. And I find it's, for whatever reason, it's like 10x easier to focus on the task at hand at that time of day for me.
Yeah. I've in the last year I've gone, sorry, Case. In the last year I've gone, well, the last 2 months I've gone much harder on my business. And I found that the hour, from 5:30 to even just an hour before my kids get up, they get up at 6:30. I can get 3 hours of work done in 1 hour because nothing else is happening, right? Go ahead, Case.
Yeah, I was going to say too, back when Dave and I used to work together at a PR agency, client service, same thing. Like I used to go in at 5:30 in the morning just because I know there'd be no incoming stuff. I could just clear stuff all morning. It's like it's borrowed time. It's almost like no one's awake. You can just nothing's being added to the pile. But this conversation leads to something else that I struggle with, and I'm curious with you, Kyle. So much of golf and how you cover is about consumption and following the sport. How do you follow these tournaments and stay up to date with everything with 4 kids? Golf is like the perfect divorce sport. It's when you're playing it, you're not helpful at home, and when you're watching it, they can see you're not being helpful. So I'm sure you've worked out an agreement with your wife, but how does that go for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it helps. Honestly, one thing that helps me is it's very, other than when the tournaments are in Europe, it's pretty much done by the end of the workday, sort of. I mean, the summer's different; it lasts a little bit longer, and I've got built-in off days. CBS gives me a couple off days a week, so it's you still have your weekend, even though for me it's usually like Thursday, Friday, or Friday, Saturday, rather than the traditional Saturday, Sunday. And I've tried to bring my kids into it. Like we've done, like sometimes when I'm watching a tournament, like I'll bring the boys in and watch with them, or a lot of times for the majors, we'll do a draft where everybody drafts players, and so they kind of get into it as well. So I've tried to meld those two worlds at least a little bit. And it is hard because, you guys can probably relate to this. I get really frustrated when they run out to my office in the middle of the day and I'm in the middle of, the great American novel. I'm just killing it. And then they just yelling and start disrupting and everything. That can be frustrating, but I've tried to remind myself, like, hey, this time is limited with them at this age. It's a very fun and tender age. My kids are 10, 9, 7, and 4. I go play golf with them. I've tried to bring them in as much as possible. And then I think the other thing with my wife is just, and I do a bad job of this, but setting expectations. Hey, here's when I'm, like this week. Hey, it's Hawaii week, so I'm going to be working from 7 to 11 on these 2 or 3 nights or whatever. So as long as I set expectations, like everything runs pretty smoothly.
Dang it, Kyle! I'm gonna get all misty now. I think that's an important perspective about, like, this is a window of our kids' life. Casey's got young kids too. My kids are 6 and 4. Um, in a decade, I'm gonna have a lot of more free time.
Yeah.
And it's tough to balance, like, what's worth doing this. I also have this moment where one of them will come in my office and I'd be like, I know it just looks like I'm staring at this screen, but like this is work. I can't articulate it in another way. Like this is dad working with his hands.
Yeah, exactly. I think, one of the underserved markets in the golf industry, or really the sports industry, is getting like there's not, and this is kind of a long like a long goal, like a long range goal that I have, but getting kids into golf alongside their parents. There's no golf content for kids. I don't know why. Or there's not any that's good. I can't let my kids listen to No Laying Up. I love those guys, but I can't.
No,
it
wouldn't work.
I can't have my 7-year-old listening to Tron. And so I think about that a lot. Is like, man, that seems like an opportunity to kind of do something there.
You know, it's funny. I just had this moment with my daughter. So I saw you tweet. You tweeted the other day. You were like rewatching 2005 Open highlights,
yeah.
and since I'm a big golf, I'm a golf media guy now. I've been rewatching, and I just read Shipnuck's book about Phil, and it made me go and rewatch the ending of the 2006 U.S. Open at Wingfoot, and I was like, "This is incredible!" So I'm trying to rewatch all these old highlights and stuff, and my daughter comes over and she sits on my lap and I'm watching. She's like, "Hey, that's that guy, Rory Macaroni." And and I'm like, "Hey, did you know he has a daughter?" And she's like, "He does." And I found some clips of like, and Casey has a daughter named Poppy, which is amazing. And
That's awesome.
So I showed him this clip of like where she FaceTimed him after a tournament. And like, I love showing them, or like John Rahm's kids running out after the Masters and stuff. I love like bringing that in. So I think you're onto something. And to go back to why we even started this podcast, the long game, right? I want to build a life where I'm playing. I want to be 80 years old and have my kids by my side, like all of us playing golf together or being in this. There are a few other hobbies and activities and sports that you can do with your family for life. And I think seems like each one of us is very invested in our family and our children. I think that's what's very special about golf to me, beyond all this like PGA Tour live nonsense. Like at the core of it, that's what is so exciting to me about golf in the future, PGA Tour or not.
Yeah, I was telling my wife this morning, like I feel a little bit jaded and toured and out on professional golf right now. For just I think most of it is the live PGA Tour stuff, all the money stuff, just all the just nonsense. But I've never felt more excited and enthusiastic about like just my own experience with golf, whether it's with friends or with kids or trying to get better or whatever. So I think there's definitely something there, and I think you've seen that in like this rise of, and some of this is just the YouTube era where a lot of stuff on YouTube hits, but the rise of like YouTube golf, people are kind of into that more so than watching the third round of the Honda Classic,
Yeah.
like, and I don't know. There's a reason for that.
I'm like,
So
why did I just spend 2 hours watching Bryson play Rick Shields
I
on
know,
YouTube? Like,
but
what am I doing?
it's kind of compelling. Like there's something there, because I think what you said is like all of us, it's such a unique sport in that you and I don't watch the Bengals and Steelers and then we're like, hey, let's go play football this afternoon. We would end up in the hospital. But with golf, you can do that, and there's a relatability there and a connection there that no other sport has, which is, I think, it's a very unique thing.
All right, we could go forever on this topic, but we got to, even though we're all jaded on the state of golf, the season is here. Can you help us not be jaded, Kyle Porter? Like, how do I watch golf and not just care about the Masters? What is there anything you're looking forward to this year? Let's do a little. We'll wrap up in the last 10 minutes just talking about the season ahead.
Well, I think obviously the merger is fascinating because I think there is an opportunity for everything to come back together in a way that is palatable, not only palatable, but compelling to the fan. Now, I don't know that I trust either side to make that happen, like to come together in a way that they're thinking of the fan first. But I do think that is possible. Here's one thing. This is unrelated to the PGA Tour, but I kind of, a lot of people have been very anti the team golf aspect. I'm kind of in on it. Like, I kind of think there's something there. I don't know that the cliques and the four aces is the answer, but I think, like, I was talking to my son the other day and he's like, Dad, I would love it if Rory and JT and Spieth were on the same team. We had like a live event on that I was watching, and he was like, I think it'd be cool if these guys that I like were on the same team. I was like, huh, okay. Yeah, I think there could be something there. So if they end up coming back together and there is a team aspect, I think that's actually kind of exciting. I think there's I think we're in the midst, Dave, of several like real historically great legacies being created. I think Rory is like a major or two away from let's have a real conversation of whether he could be a top 10 player of all time. I've got Phil like right at that top like 10th mark, and Rory's kind of tracking for Phil's career depending on the major thing. Rahm, I mentioned earlier, is tracking historically, and then Brooks Koepka historically is one of the all-time greats. So I think there's some stuff there. Obviously, that's major focus. And you were talking about PGA Tour. The young guys on the PGA Tour, Ludwig obviously is incredibly exciting. You've got Gordon Sargent at Vanderbilt coming out. I think he's going to be a superstar on the PGA Tour. So you've got some young stars that are going to, I don't know, they're not going to fill Jon Rahm's shoes, but they are going to fill a little bit of the void, I think, that's been left by Jon Rahm on the PGA Tour.
All right. I'll buy it.
Well, Kyle, you had a great tweet the other day I connected with about basically you were saying how you were very honestly said you feel a little less I forget the word you used, but excited to cover the Century because of Rahm not being in it and looking at the field. This is the same way I feel about, I'm all for people making whatever money they want. Selfishly, I want there to be one tour, and I want it to be the PGA Tour. It's what I grew up with. We talk about like you were rewatching the 2004 Open or 2005. Like imagine looking back on that and taking, a handful of those guys out. Like, is the legacy still there? Is it just different people? I don't know. But just talk a little bit about that, about Rahm and covering a sport that, or a league that is losing some of its key figures.
Yeah, I think it's weird because the PGA Tour has never been all the top guys in the world, because you've always had the European Tour, right? Like when we were kids in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was the European Tour was a real thing. I mean, a lot of the top guys in the world were European Tour players. And so once those guys started coming over to the PGA Tour more, they still, and this is where I think there can still be some excitement, Dave, they still weren't all required to play the same events. And now, even though you've lost some, all the top guys are going to be playing the same events. So even though you've taken out some of these like upper crust guys, you still have in effect what you had in the 90s and early 2000s, which is most of the top players playing most of the best events. So I think it's just hard because last year it was like all the top guys, I guess, excluding DJ and Bryson and Brooks. But the Rahm thing it's more of a it's specific to Rahm, because I think people underestimate his gravity as a historically great player. And the best events have always just been where the best players go. Like if he goes to play in a event in Spain on the European Tour, which he's done, that all of a sudden becomes a legitimate thing, like a legitimate event. And so I just personally, like, if you take Rory or Rahm out of a tournament, because those are the two most historically relevant players for me, that tournament loses its gravity. And so the fact that both of them are not at Kapalua for different reasons, it's kind of like, yeah, it's still going to be fun. It might be the best, event they've ever had there, but just going into it on the front end, for me, I just am not feeling as excited as I was this time last year.
It's honest. It's a great take. I'm right there with you. Totally.
I meant to ask this earlier. I'm a nerd, so I'm gonna ask. You're watching the golf 7 to 11 at night. Are you taking notes? Are you making notes then? Are you using Twitter like as your kind of notes for the next day? Like, or you just kind of have your feet up and watching? What happens in the lab?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've gone back and forth on this. I'm on Twitter, as we all are, probably too much. And I find myself really focused on the golf early, and then I slowly over time just my eyeballs gravitate toward Twitter. Part of that is because commercials and everything else. I am making notes usually. I use Twitter as kind of a repository, and I've talked about this for the book. I'll tweet stuff that I want to write about later, or just like little notes for myself. And then I'm kind of see it as like, I'm really doing this for me. I'm writing for myself, but I'm sharing it to all these people that follow me or whatever, and they can do whatever they want with it, which people do whatever they want with it. But a lot of times, Dave, during events, I try to read all the transcripts, or most of the transcripts that come in from that day. If I'm not at an event, I do this when I'm at events too, but if I'm not at an event, I'll pull all the transcripts and just read through, hey, what did Spieth say about his round? Did JT say anything interesting about his driver today? Did, whatever. You kind of know some of the storylines going in, but I'll read a lot of those transcripts. I'll be constantly on ShotLink, which is just sort of the PGA Tour's deepest dive into the stats and data, and I'll be kind of tracking that for, okay, what was Hovland's strokes gain on approach today? Did he have, like, where was he losing strokes? Did he because you can't watch every shot, right? They don't even show every shot, so you're kind of using all these different tools to piece together, okay, what is the main focus of this round? Was it Hovland shooting 63? Was it maybe Rory shot an 81? You're kind of piecing everything together as the round goes on.
And with that approach, when you're not at a tournament, you're covering from afar, going through transcript and stuff, do you find that you ever run into issues with context, or just, what do you get there that you're not getting at home, vice versa?
Yeah, I think it's mostly, so it's two things. It's one, observation. So I remember being at the 2021 US Open at Pebble, and I was on the 11th hole, I think it was, and Ches Reavie and Brooks Koepka were showing each other what kind of dip they were using. Like, what kind of
love that.
what they were chewing, and you don't get that on TV, right?
No.
Like that's impossible to pick up unless you're there. And that was such a hilarious, just observational thing that was minute. But then the other thing is the atmosphere, and this is probably more specific to majors. Kapalulu's atmosphere, there's not really that many people there anyway, but you don't get the there's nothing in golf I love more than the feeling of it being tied with like 4 holes to go at a major, and you're standing right next to John Rahm, you're standing right next to Brooks Koepka, and you're like, I'm in the arena. I'm not in the arena, but I'm an observer inside of it. And I think that comes out in the writing in a way that you can't replicate from afar.
Love that. All right, Kyle, we got to let you go, man. This was more than kind of you to come and hang out with us. I feel like there's a lot we could talk about. Maybe we'll, a couple of years down the road, we'll have spun off, and this will be the beginning of our, kids golf media, empire that we built together. So you never know. You just never know what can happen from these conversations.
I love it. That's
yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah. All right, let's do it. Go follow Kyle. He's Kyle Porter, CBS on Twitter. Subscribe to his newsletter. I think there's nothing more valuable than building the email list. So I'm proud of you for doing that. anormalsport.com. And he has Normal Sport 3 out right now, which is a book he's been writing.
Which is great. Yeah, it's a recap of the last year in golf, just on different things Kyle had written and tweeted. And he recommends that you print it out and kill about 3 birch trees like I did.
Awesome.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on. I'd love to do like a quarter year or mid-year check-in with you guys if you want to do that.
Done. Hold on. Okay. Let me check with our management. Yes, we'll do that. Definitely. Confirmed. All right, Kyle. Thank you, man. We'll see you later.
He's talking the long game.
They played the long game.
The long game gotta play the long game.
They're experienced and they played the long game.
No, you're talking the long game.
I felt that I had that much control, and